in South Dakota, ag means business. And you can say those things. You can even believe them. But sometimes words are just words. And then when you see the action come to reality, you know that you're making forward progress. And in South Dakota, from the very top, we've had someone that's been leading the way. Not just saying words, but those words are made up of actions. Leading the way, being South Dakota's #1 salesman, not just in our communities, but across the country. Whether it was in California talking to ag producers, or whether it was in Boston recruiting biotechnology firms to take a look at South Dakota. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a #1 salesman in this state, and he leads by example. He holds his staff accountable. He holds his agencies accountable. It's our state government, your state government, working together with the governor of South Dakota. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming our #1 salesman, South Dakota's first gentleman, Governor Dennis Daugaard. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Thank you. Welcome to Pierre for the 2012 Ag Summit. Got a great room full. I have all my friends over on this side of the room, on the far end. I'm going to talk for maybe 20 minutes or so, just a little bit about agriculture in South Dakota. But then I want to leave some time for questions, and Nathan's going to help me keep track of the time so that we get you out of here on time. I want to begin by recognizing some folks that are in the room that you should be aware are here. First, among our congressional delegation, we have Sharon Stroschein from Senator Tim Johnson's office. Sharon, thank you for coming. And I don't believe we have any other representatives from the congressional delegation, or do we? I don't think so. Okay, we also have some legislators here. We have Representative Jim Schaefer over here. Jim, thank you for coming. Right next to him is Representative Paul Dennert. Paul, thank you for coming. And then I heard Mark Vennert was here, and I didn't see him, but is he here? Representative Mark Vennert? He must have left. Also, our PUC Commissioner Christy Fegan is here. Christy, right here. Christy, good to have you. And I think our PUC Commissioner Chris Nelson is here, right there. Thanks for being with us, Chris. And our main man in agriculture education, the Dean of the SDSU College of Agriculture, Dean Barry Dunn. Dean, welcome to you, sir. Now, after introducing all those old folks, I want to introduce some young folks. We have a number of the state FFA officers who are here, and I don't know them by name, but I just asked them to stand up and be welcomed by all of us. State FFA officers here. Welcome. As some of you know, I grew up on a farm in southeastern South Dakota between Del Rapids and Garrettson. I'm 59 years old. I was born in 1953, and so when I was growing up on the farm, it was a little bit different in agriculture in those days. We were a little slower to adopt, I would say, newer practices too. So we still have a pretty diversified farm. When I was growing up, we had cattle, we had hogs, we had chickens. I'm one of those among us who still understand what it means when you say someone's running around like a chicken with his head cut off. I know what that means. We still had a corn picker in those days. We still shelled corn. We still even we still have some home movies of binding oats and I can remember back in the day when I was helping Dad pick corn. One of my jobs was when we came in with the wagon. Of course, in those days we had a little elevator and a hoist that hoisted the front wheels of the wagon.
And we had a little end gate on the wagon, and we'd lift it up, and I'd get inside the wagon full of corn on the cob, and if the corn got stuck, my job was to kick it down and get it flowing down into the elevator that would elevate it up into the corn crib. And I remember once when I was doing that, my shoe came off. I was kicking the corn, and along with the corn, there went my shoe right up the elevator into the corn crib. And I was a little worried that Dad would be mad at me, but we had a good laugh. And the best thing was that a couple days later, I got a pair of brand new shoes. So I figured I might do that more often. When I was in elementary school, we switched to dairy farming, and we had those surge bucket milkers. We had 4 stanchions. We'd bring in cows 4 at a time and put belts on 2 of them and hang those surge buckets from them, and then switch them over to the other 2, and then herd those 4 out and bring in 4 more, and that's how we milked. Of course, much has changed in agriculture since I was a kid, and extraordinary technological advances have dramatically changed agriculture and dramatically increased our productivity. And you know some of these numbers, but they bear repeating. Compared to 1950, just a few years before I was born, we now produce 63% more milk with 58% fewer cows. We produce 176% more pork with 44% fewer sows. An increased productivity for grain is even more impressive. Again, compared to 1950, just 3 years before I was born, we produced 333% more corn on only 11% more acres, 11 times more soybeans on only 5 times more acres, 69% more wheat on only 6% fewer acres. So this tremendous productivity gain in agriculture has offered lots of economic opportunities, and especially in the area of value-added enterprises. And new and existing South Dakota companies are taking advantage of these productivity gains and opportunities. From Dakota Provisions in Huron, to Valley Queen in Mitchell, to Jack Links in Alpena, to the new Bell Brands cheese facility that we're going to be breaking grounds on tomorrow in Brookings. All these places, among many others, have started to capitalize on the potential for economic development through agriculture. And even though agriculture is South Dakota's #1 industry, with nearly $21 billion in economic impact each year, there's still tremendous opportunities for growth. Livestock, for example, have an incredible ability to generate wealth. And I know you've seen some of these Department of Ag figures, but again, they bear repeating. Each sow in our swine operations has a $6,000 annual economic impact. Each beef cow has a $1,700 economic impact. Each dairy cow has an annual economic impact of over $13,000. So if we can raise more pigs, feed more cattle, and milk more cows, the economic benefits will reverberate throughout our entire state. As we produce more livestock, we support value-added enterprises like those I named, and others like Davisco in Lake Norden, John Morrell's in Sioux Falls, and the Northern Beef Packers facility under construction in Aberdeen. And of course, increased livestock production and processing leads to more jobs. Over 80,000 South Dakotans are already employed in agriculture in one way or another, and its related industries, and we've got the capacity to employ thousands more. In order to capitalize on this market, in order to capitalize on this potential, we're making a renewed commitment to expanding livestock development in South Dakota, and we want everyone to know that South Dakota is open for business. Last February, as Lucas mentioned, I traveled to Tulare, California, to the World Ag Expo to try and promote our state as a great place for dairy production. One of the reasons Bell Brands is coming to Brookings, and reasons why Valley Queen and Davisco and AgroPure and others up and down the I-29 milk corridor, one of the reasons they're there is because they believe dairy production will continue to be in South Dakota and will grow in South Dakota. In California, the great demand for nut crops, tree nut crops, almonds in particular, are resulting in large amounts of ag production. Ag land formerly used for forage crops are now being converted to nut crops. And we talked with a number of dairy producers in California who were concerned about that. They used to get their alfalfa from this field over here, and lo and behold, it's full of almond trees now. And once you plant almond trees, of course, it takes a while for those trees to grow and become productive. And once you've invested that time and effort in making them productive, you're not going to readily switch back to another crop. You're going to be stuck with that nut crop for decades. So forage costs are generally higher in California than in South Dakota. And of course, milk prices are sometimes lower. You've seen, I'm sure, the billboard that Davisco has put up in California. And help me with the slogan.
No base, no quota, milk your cows.
Yeah, no base, no quota, milk your cows in South Dakota. Because we don't have a base and a quota system that the state of California has imposed upon its milk pricing strategies. We have a free market in South Dakota. Our low taxes, abundant feed and water, and ready access to a number of dairy processing facilities makes South Dakota a very good place for dairy. And I'll give you a number. We've got about 90,000 dairy cows in South Dakota, and I heard a cheese producer or a cheese maker yesterday talk about his belief that we could support at least another 60,000 more. The AgroPure plant just over the line in Iowa would like to double in size. Valley Queen is interested in expansion. Bell Brands is going to build a plant that will produce probably about 10,000, I think it was 10,000 metric tons. I'm not gonna recite the number. I'll get it wrong, but the point I'm making is the plant they're going to build starting tomorrow will be of a size that can be doubled in 2016 or 2017 if the demand is there. And the demand is there, I believe. They've seen their Bell Brands, their Mini Bell, Baby Bell cheeses. Demand for that cheese in America has grown by 25% per year, several years in a row. And they're already importing about 50% of the cheese that they're selling in the supermarket from France. So they'd much rather produce it here in America, and I'd like them to produce it right here in South Dakota. So to supplement the efforts that the private industry is undertaking, the South Dakota Department of Agriculture has put together a livestock development plan, not just for dairy, but for other livestock groups. And you'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks, but I'm excited about the potential for raising more livestock in our state. We've got the right ingredients. And we look forward to working with counties, local communities, and farmers to make it easier to site these facilities in South Dakota in the communities that want them. And of course, that's the challenge. Local zoning, as you know, and local county commissions make that decision, and it's a local control issue. And so I think it's important, though, that each of those local government entities has all the information so that they understand the impacts of the decisions they make. That if they choose not to have a livestock facility in their county, they understand the economic advantages that they're turning down. And those that choose to agree to a livestock facility in their county, they understand the property tax benefits, the economic benefits that flow to the producers in that area and the advantages of that. Of course, with increased livestock and grain production, we need ready markets for our products. And to address this need, I've also put an emphasis on expanding our international trade opportunities. Total exports from South Dakota are about $3.8 billion in value per year. 1.4 billion of that is in manufactured goods, and 2.4 billion is in agriculture products. 2.4 billion in agriculture products. Mexico, Canada, and China are three largest trading partners, and in the last 5 years, exports from South Dakota to China have grown 200%, from 34 million in 2007 to 105 million in 2011. And I know your conversations with the ambassador will probably have informed you that China became our #1 export market. And so with 90% of the world's population and 2/3 of the world's purchasing power outside the United States, we have an incredible opportunity to expand our markets, expand our business opportunities for South Dakotans. And so the Department of Ag and the Governor's Office of Economic Development are focusing and trying to find ways that we can help find export markets for our South Dakota ag products. This year, with the help of the North Dakota Trade Office and other groups, we're assisting small businesses with reducing the learning curve that they have to go through to understand how to export their products. And we're stepping up our involvement in trade missions. Last China, I joined Walt Bones, the Secretary of Agriculture, Lucas, a number of the head of our economic development effort, Pat Costello, Ryan Budmeyer back there. We went to China to learn how we can encourage China to consider South Dakota products for their market. We're accompanied not only by folks interested in agriculture like Luke Minion, who will be on the next panel this afternoon, but also by manufacturers like Daktronics and Colberg Pioneer in Yankton and Lloyd Systems in Rapid City. So between manufactured products and ag products, we wanted to see what we could do to encourage more business with China. We started in Beijing and we met with COFCO. COFCO is one of the state-sponsored large ag producing and processing conglomerates. COFCO stands for the China Cereals, Oils, and Foodstuffs Corporation. And the COFCO Group is their largest food processing manufacturer and trader. So the biggest food processing company and trader in China. Then the next day we went 400 miles by train to the Shandong province. And that is one of the major ag provinces. They call their states in China provinces, like China calls their sections provinces, not states. But Shandong province is one of the two big ag provinces in China. And I couldn't help but notice, and I've remarked on it several times since, the train ride from Beijing to Jinan, where we met which is the capital of the Shandong province, was 400 miles long. We traveled by train 400 miles right through ag country, and we saw 4 tractors during that ride, 4 tractors. We saw a lot of people working the fields, but they were working the fields with hand tools. One of our party even saw someone plowing with an ox. And so much is made about China and their new prominence in the world and their dynamic gross domestic product growth of 8% was 10%. Well, when you start pretty small in some ways, to get a percent addition is easier than if you're bigger in other ways. So people, and I would say when we looked at the cities, there was much of what you would see in an American city. You have the skyscrapers, and there was lots of construction going on and lots of traffic, and you saw, of course, you see the bicycle and the motor scooters, but you also saw the Volkswagens and Buicks and Audis and other vehicles on very nice roads. But in terms of agriculture, we saw a small part of the country, but I think it's very representative of what agriculture is like in China. I went on Wikipedia before I put these remarks together because I thought, did what I see really represent what is true about agriculture in China? And I believe it does. The plots, the size of our fields, of course, are measured in hundreds and thousands of acres in our part of the country and in America. There, the average size of a family's farm plot is 0.65 hectares, which is 1.6 acres. So imagine every one of you that's a farmer, your farm is 2 acres. Yours would be bigger than China. So that tells you a little bit about their agriculture system. And here was another sign of it. We're driving down a highway in China, an asphalt road, much like a county road we see here. And it's fairly wide road, had some fairly wide shoulders on the road. And we came across what I thought was the remnants of a spill, of a grain spill, because here was all this shelled corn that was apparently spilled on the asphalt. No, I was told. It's been spread on the asphalt to dry. And then later I saw people shoveling it into sacks because it had finished drying. That's how they're drying their corn there. And go on Google and just type in corn, drying, China, asphalt, and you'll find 20 such accounts like that. I'm not the only one who saw that and said, what's going on here? There's a lot of people that have seen it and remarked that way. One aspect of their agriculture that I thought was interesting, though, was their proliferation of greenhouses. And when I think of a greenhouse, I think of what you see either a hoop-style, plastic-covered greenhouse, or a fiberglass or glass greenhouse, or the gorgeous greenhouses that we've got at SDSU. In China, their greenhouses are much more simple, and I would say advanced in one sense, that they're very little capital involved, very low capital investment. They come along, and imagine this room, about the length of this room. We went down and we dug a trench about as wide as a township ditch, and we piled that dirt up onto a pile, and we created a dirt wall that's maybe as tall as me or a little taller, a dirt wall. And then we implanted in that dirt wall some bamboo rods that went toward the south in kind of a bent shape, in a quarter circle, and some aluminum truss kind of things that are also in that bent shape. And then they cover that with plastic. So you've got a long greenhouse, about as long as this room maybe, that's about, I would say 20 feet deep and maybe 8 feet high, that's covered with plastic. And then they plant tomatoes or cucumbers, and they hang strings or cellophane tape from those aluminum trusses. And so they have vertical plants hanging on these trusses of either tomatoes or cucumbers. And the sun comes in on the sunny day, and this is a south-facing greenhouse. And then when the sun goes down, they roll down straw insulation mats. They just roll out like a blanket, and that holds the heat in overnight, even when the temperature might drop down to lower temperatures, even maybe below freezing in some cases. And then in the morning when the sun came out, they'd roll that blanket back up again, and they told me they could raise 2 different crops. And their climate, this was in Jinan, I would say their climate is not as cold as here, but not a lot different, So that was just something I thought that was interesting, and in some ways it represented an adaptation that was very low capital. And they said it took about 2 people to manage that greenhouse. They covered the floor of it with plastic, and when they planted the plants, they punched through the plastic, and then they had a pipe in there that flood irrigated the floor. And in fact, one of them had an underground compost pit where they put all the trash from that, and maybe from their foodstuffs as well, and then they piped the methane gas back into the greenhouses, and it could, in some cases, speed the maturation of the tomatoes. And then they also used the methane gas for lights at night. So I don't know how well that worked. We were there during the daytime. I don't know if it was more show than go, but that was interesting as well. But when it comes to their small grain production, their livestock production, I'd say the inefficiency of their production methods was fairly sobering. And it made me appreciate the incredible productivity of South Dakota farmers. Now that trip to China was a start. In the coming months, we're going to continue to look for ways to increase international trade opportunities. We've had some Chinese groups come over. I was speaking to one of our presenters about the milk problems they're having in China. And they've had so many contaminations with melamine over there. We did go to a fluid milk production facility, and it was interesting to me at the end of the line where I expected to see either cartons of milk or jugs of milk like we find in our supermarkets here. They had little plastic bags of milk about the size of, say, a dried fruit bag. Maybe they're an inch thick, maybe 5 by 5, and that's how and this was not irradiated milk, it was refrigerated milk, and they delivered it through retail stores. This was in a metropolitan area again. Retail milk stores, not big supermarkets, but milk stores. And then, of course, the Chinese live in so many high-rise or very highly intensive residential units that they have. If you went to college, you remember the little door that you open to get your mail at college? Well, they have little milk doors that they open to get their milk every day in these big apartment buildings. I just thought that was interesting to you. But anyway, we're going to continue to look for ways to increase international trade. Those kinds of visits have helped me realize what an opportunity we have. If you want to buy milk in China, you might buy it that way. But if you have some concern about the quality of your milk product and you're buying at the store or at the grocery store, you might look for United States processed milk if you're concerned about food safety. But we have to remember, of course, through all this, South Dakota farmers doing well, South Dakota ranchers doing well, is great for their families, but it's also great for their communities and all the people who work for those farmers and ranchers and work for industries and businesses that support them, whether they provide feed or they construct buildings or they sell machinery or whatever they do. There's just hundreds and hundreds of businesses in South Dakota that are there and successful only if agriculture is there and successful. And that's why it's so important that agriculture be the main effort that we undertake to secure the economic future for South Dakota. Agriculture generates 20% of our state's economic activity. So when commodity prices are high and times are good, we tend to get complacent. But good times don't last forever, so we have to continue to grow and diversify this industry. And South Dakota has the land, the people, the drive, and the opportunity to build this important economic sector for the next generation. And we need to look for ways right now to bring in quality development that will help keep agriculture as South Dakota's #1 industry. We need to do this by looking for areas capable and willing to sustain development and supporting them in preparation for it. And I'm confident we'll continue to produce the feed, fiber, and fuel and food to fuel our growing world needs while remaining a strong component of our economy, because South Dakota agriculture means business. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer any questions. We have some time, Nathan. We got about 8 minutes for questions, and that's about all you could take. So, anybody, any questions on any topic whatsoever? Ideally ag, but not necessarily. Yes, sir.
The ambassador talked this morning about different markets that we have free trade agreements with now, including Korea and Colombia. Are you looking at some of those other markets, potential ag markets, due to the risk with Korea and the potential for export for beef, and then obviously Colombia for their proximity and because they're a pretty good market for either feed stuff or pork?
The question was, are we looking at other markets? You know, the ambassador this morning talked about Korea. talked about Colombia, other places where there are trade agreements. We are wide open. We're just putting our toe into this water, and frankly, I am very naive about this whole area. I do know that we shouldn't be cloistered. We shouldn't look inward. We've got lots of food. We've got tremendous productivity. The likelihood is that productivity will grow even more. So we need to find markets. Now, where we go, I'm wide open. I think Walt is wide open, and our Economic Development Office is wide open. We don't want to be too scattered in our efforts, because sometimes you do business after you have a relationship with someone you believe or trust in. So that's one of the reasons why we went to China. We thought, well, let's start building a relationship with our #1 export market. And we do know that they're going to have trouble, because as their population grows, I'm sure you've heard it before, but biggest country in the world in terms of population, 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion. Next is India, 1.2 billion. Then all the way down to the United States, about 300 million. So the big giants in terms of world population are China and India. And China, because it has a relatively small land mass to produce food, and they're doing it relatively inefficiently, seems to me to be a very good market that has great long-term potential for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we should look elsewhere, and so we're wide open. And those of you that have some experience or have some knowledge that you think bears on this question, please help us decide what to do in these areas, because we're talking to North Dakota. They've been on this path a little bit longer than we have, and I'm pretty good friends with the governor of North Dakota, and the North Dakota Trade Office has been very generous about sharing what they do and the path they've followed, and I think they've had some successes. So we're following a path that hasn't been fruitless, but again, we're still learning, and I know that combined we're smarter than we are individually. So help us make those decisions and see opportunities where they arise. Thank you for that question. Other questions? Yes, sir. The question was about cuts at South Dakota State University research and teaching. The cuts at SDSU were among cuts that were made statewide. If you look at the state general fund budget, we have about $1.2 billion in our state general fund. We collect some revenues that are not general revenues, but they're dedicated. So for example, you collect entrance fees to parks. Those have to be spent on parks. You collect gas tax money. That has to be spent on roads. That's constitutional. It's a constitutional provision. But then there are other revenues like our sales tax, like contractors' excise tax, bank franchise tax, that can be spent on anything. So what has your legislature historically decided to spend it on? Well, historically about half of that $1.2 billion is spent on education. It comes into the state, goes right back out to either K-12 or the university system or the technical schools. So half of the money that comes in goes right out to education. About another quarter, half of what's left, I'll say it that way, half of what's left, which would be a quarter of the whole, goes to take care of people that can't take care of themselves. Medicaid, really, is what it is. Who's Medicaid? Medicaid is the frail elderly person that's run out of money and is in the nursing home. They have no money, they can't take care of themselves, so we're taking care of them. Medicaid is taking care of them. The largest number of the 116,000 South Dakotans that are on Medicaid is children of low-income families. Another group that's in Medicaid is disabled people that are in Achieve in Sioux Falls, or the workshop in Black Hills, or Echo in Madison, people that we used to call mentally retarded or very severely disabled, those people are on Medicaid. So if you take that 1.2 billion, half it's on education, a quarter of it is Medicaid, then most of the rest is spent on law enforcement. It's either the court systems, it's the prison systems, it's the highway patrol, state's attorneys, or the Attorney General's office. That's most of the rest. 4% is the rest of state government. The governor's office, the legislature, agriculture, environment and natural resources, labor, revenue. Every state agency, all the constitutional offices, everything is about 4% of our budget. So, I tell you all that because South Dakota in fiscal year 2009 saw its revenue drop. It didn't slow its growth, it went down. Our tax revenue went down. Then in fiscal year 10, it went down again, further down. In those 2 years, we kept spending more. Our revenue went down in 09, we spent more anyway. Our revenue went down in fiscal year 10, we spent more anyway again. And the only reason we were able to do that is because we had federal stimulus money that filled that gap. Well, the stimulus money ran out. So, like any of you who maybe rely on savings to get through a bad year or two, at some point you can't do that anymore. You either have to increase revenue, that means raise taxes, which I had committed not to do. I had promised not to do that during that campaign, which was right as the recession was upon us, or cut expenses, which I did. I cut every state agency at least 10%, some more than that. I cut the governor's office 12%. I cut my salary 15%. I cut K-12 10%, or I proposed 10%. It ended up being K-12 education. It ended up being around 8%. I proposed cutting the universities 10%, and they took that cut and made it work. I cut Medicaid 10%. So if a child on Medicaid went to the doctor to get their broken arm set, they got paid 10% less for setting that arm. And it depends on some Medicaid providers were cut more and some were cut less. So I guess I give you that backdrop to so that you can see that it wasn't so much a decision that this is a program I don't like or don't support, because I do. I like research. I like SDSU. All three of my kids went there. I like ag. I'm an ag kid. We still live on the farm that my grandfather bought 100 years ago, and that's where I'll go back home to when I'm done with this job. I love agriculture, but everybody had to share. Everybody had to share that burden. If any one group got out of the boat, why wouldn't everyone else want out? And if one group gets out of the boat and says, I'm not going to share in the cuts, that means everyone else in the boat has to be cut more. So, the legislature made some very hard decisions and had courage, and I commend them for it, to make those cuts that were proposed and get our spending down to where our revenue was. Now what's happened is we're recovering a little faster than we thought. So we brought our spending down, but our revenue jumped up a little bit higher. So we're going to end this fiscal year in the black. We're going to have some money on the bottom line that the legislature will decide what to do with in the next session. And our revenue looks like it's coming back. So my hope is, and it's a long way to get the answer, my hope is that some of these areas that had to take these cuts will be able to restore them. And research is one of those areas. So I was visiting with some of the Board of the Regents just today about that very thing. So I'm not insensitive to how important research is in South Dakota. Research turns into that productivity that's made agriculture so strong. And we need to keep investing in that research. And I'm getting the hook. So thank you so much. Thank you for the great question, and thank you for all you do for agriculture. Let's keep South Dakota #1 and growing and stronger than ever.
This is a small token of our appreciation for spending some time with us. Again, just wanted to thank the governor for spending some time with us, and we just gave him a small token of our appreciation. So thank you, Governor.
Is this paid for by state tax dollars?
No, sir.
Okay.
That's why we have such great sponsors here, and they've been flashing on the screen the whole time. So we have some great sponsors that are doing that. So